Welcome to A Health Coach Answers. I'm Coach Lindsay, and today I'm going to be answering your Mighty Health members' top 5 questions of the week. So like I said, we have some big questions today, and I'm excited to dive into a lot of these. As we get started here, our first question, again, is a big question. And the question is, are sugar substitutes really better than real sugar? So I'm sure you guys have heard, the big, artificial sweeteners have become really big over the past, few years, especially in terms of weight loss and 0-calorie drinks, trying to make things a little bit healthier. And so I want to talk about just, are they better than real sugar? So first, let's talk about sugar and get that out of the way. So when it comes to sugar, sugar is not necessarily bad for you if consumed in moderation. So the RDA, which stands for the recommended daily allowance per the FDA, is less than 10% of your calories should come from sugar, and that's 10% of your total calories. So when you're looking at sugar, though, that's not just added sugar from your packaged foods. That's sugar from your fruit, your sugary vegetables like tomatoes and stuff like that. So we're talking sugar as a whole should be no more than 10% of your total calories. So the problem here is that most Americans, or most people in general, consume double, triple, quadruple that. So it's not that sugar itself is the problem, it's the amount that we're consuming on a daily basis. So just to get that out of the way, when it comes to, artificial sweeteners, again, they've become really, really popular over the last few years. And there are 6 artificial sweeteners that are approved for use in the US. So these artificial sweeteners are investigated by the FDA. There are hundreds of studies on them. They are deemed generally safe for us to consume in moderation. So these sweeteners are stevia, asulfame K, or you'll see asulfame potassium on a lot of labels, same thing, aspartame, neotame, saccharin, and sucralose. So these are the 6 biggest artificial sweeteners. I'm sure a lot of them sound really familiar to you. You'll see these in a lot of diet sodas, sugar-free dessert options, sugar-free foods, a lot of that stuff. So let's talk about the benefits of artificial sweeteners and why they are what they are. And so they provide a low to no energy for the body. So meaning they don't provide the body with calories, which is really nice for weight loss, right? If we're trying to decrease our calories, we're trying to decrease our blood sugar spikes, our sugar intake, our carb intake, that's where these come into play. They are 200 to 300 times more sweeter than real sugar. So it takes less to provide the same amount of sweetness. In terms of a industrial standpoint, it is cheaper for a lot of companies. And so there are some benefits. And like I said, especially for weight loss. So let's talk a little bit about the negatives of artificial sweeteners. And so basically, when it comes to artificial sweeteners, they still provide the body with an insulin response. It's just they don't spike our blood sugar. And so with that insulin response, depending on how much you're eating, how often you're consuming it, that might increase your appetite, which could lead to the weight gain, the cardiovascular disease, all of that stuff. And so depending on how you're utilizing artificial sweeteners, they can have the opposite result of what they were designed to do. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is some sugar substitutes, like the aspartame and the asulfame and all that stuff, they are synthetically made. So they're made in a lab. And so if that's something that you value as far as what goes into your body, that's something to consider. You do have your sugar substitutes as far as stevia, monk fruit, some of those things that are more natural, which that's kind of the road you want to go down. But when it comes to those, synthetic artificial sweeteners, yes, they are approved, by the FDA. Yes, they are generally safe, but they're still synthetic. So something to keep in mind. And then another kind of downside, I guess, of artificial sweeteners is that there's not a lot of long-term research on how it affects our body long-term. So artificial sweeteners really became a big thing in the 70s and 80s. And so when you look at that, that's really not that long ago. And so we don't have a lot of research to show that consumption or the impact of consumption over a long period of time. There are a lot of animal studies, just not a lot of human studies. So another thing to consider when you're looking at what's best for you. So, really to summarize the question, or get to the answer of the question, is, sugar substitutes better than real sugar? Yes. For weight loss, 100%. But if you fall into that category of somebody who maybe weight loss isn't your main priority, maybe you already fall into that category of people, or, of the consumption of less than 10% of your calories are coming from sugar, then I don't think it's necessary for you to introduce artificial sweeteners, because it doesn't sound like sugar is a risk factor for you at that point. So some things to consider there, as also, artificial sweeteners are a kind of a middleman, or a lesser of the two evils. So if you're someone who really struggles with sugar, and you're trying to get off of that sugar addiction, coming to the artificial sweeteners is great. But that, again, it's a middleman. So we want to eventually get to the point where we're not having to sweeten our foods, we're not having to consume them on a regular basis. And then eventually, as you start to kind of adjust and slowly, gradually decrease your intake, your palate is going to adjust as well, to where you're not craving sugar and not having to sweeten your foods as often. So they are way better for weight loss, as far as not providing the body with calories. However, they still are mostly synthetic, and they're, again, the lesser of the two evils. So some things to consider when you're looking at those sugar substitutes or artificial sweeteners. Getting to our second question, is calorie tracking important in order to lose weight? So I know a lot of you have had this question, especially as you're coming on, taking a peek at our food log, and you're like, what the heck? There's no place to put calories. Like, what do we do? And as coaches, we get this question a lot, and it's a very valid question. So when it comes to tracking calories, okay, so science has taught us that yes, in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. There's no question about that. That's biologically how we work. And so getting into how to achieve that is the general rule to go about this is there's 3,500 calories in 1 pound. So by eating 250 calories less and expending 250 calories more through exercise, movement throughout your day, that's going to result in 500 calorie deficit per day, resulting in a 1 pound weight loss per week. So that's a lot of numbers, and don't worry too much about that, but that's kind of how it's been really designed for us. And so yes, the body has to be in a calorie deficit. However, it is not the only way to lose weight, okay? It's not the only way to achieve weight loss. It's not the only way to achieve success. So when we're looking at calories, not all calories are created equal. So the amount of calories you eat in a day doesn't really determine whether your diet is good or not. And foods that have the same quantity of calories can have completely different nutritional values. Your body's gonna metabolize them differently at different rates. So a lot of things to consider there. So, when it comes to our focus, and when it comes to really calorie tracking in general, we choose not to focus on calorie counting because it's not always sustainable long term. And your calorie requirements can change. So if you're active and you're working out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe you're gonna need more calories on those days than the days that you're not as active or you're more sedentary. And so that can be a lot to figure out. It's overwhelming. It can be confusing. And so, we want to focus on sustainable change and what's gonna allow you to reach your goal, maybe a little bit slower, but so you don't have to do it again, right? And then when it comes to calorie tracking too, there is a downside for those who have eating disorders, which, at Mighty Health, we don't really deal with a lot of eating disorders on a clinical level here as health coaches. But if you're somebody out there who has been diagnosed with an eating disorder, or maybe you're concerned about an eating disorder, calorie tracking might not be the best option for you because it can become very obsessive, and it can create a bad relationship with food. So there are benefits, of course, and then there are, some downsides as well, just like with anything out there. So the bottom line, I guess, answer to this question is yes, you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, but you don't have to track every single calorie to achieve that calorie deficit. So you can achieve a calorie deficit by eating smaller portions, focusing on fueling your body with nutrient-dense foods that are satiating, like healthy fats, proteins, complex carbs, and then intuitively eating and listening to your hunger cues. A lot of times that overeating or overconsumption of food comes from not allowing our body to, or I guess our stomach to catch up with our brain that we're full. So slowing down, eating slowly, eating smaller portions, focusing on nutrient dense foods, you're gonna achieve the same result without having to just sit there and obsessively track calories. So it's not necessary for weight loss, but it is an option. And I say that too, because if you're somebody who has tracked calories for a long time and it's worked for you, that's amazing. That's what we want. That's ultimately what we want to achieve, is something that works for you. So if you've tracked calories, it works for you, great. You can do that. That's what we want you to do. But if you're somebody who's maybe tracked calories before, once you stop, you start to gain your weight back, you're not successful, you yo-yo, maybe it's time to start, to try something a little bit different, and just really focus on that quality of food versus the quantity of food. So our third question, like I said, we're getting into some pretty heavy nutrition topics here, is low-fat dairy products better than full-fat when it comes to weight loss? And another really, really common question that we get as coaches, especially when it comes to the food log, logging your low fat, no fat, like yogurts and cottage cheese and sour cream, stuff like that. So when it comes to fat doesn't make us fat. It's the sugar and the carbs and the overconsumption of food that we're eating that leads to that weight gain. So fat is necessary for our bodies. It's a satiating nutrient. There's 9 calories per gram of fat. So it is a higher calorie food, but it's going to provide our bodies with fullness and energy a lot longer. Our body needs, or the RDA in our body needs 20 to 35% of your total calories per day coming from fat. So that's a third of your calories should be coming from fats, but healthy fats, okay? So we're not looking at like the trans fat or the synthetic fats that are in a lot of packaged foods. So animal fats are best, which includes the dairy products, which includes, animal fats, nuts, so healthy fats from nuts, stuff like that. So not all fats are created equal. And when it comes to the low and no fat foods, they tend to be more processed because they're manufactured to remove the naturally occurring fat. So with that, you're taking away the fat, but then maybe they're adding more sugar or more carbs to the food. And so something to be mindful of too. And it really kind of comes down to what your main goal is. So if you have, had blood work done or whatever, and you've seen your physician and they say, hey, your cholesterol is up a little bit, you need to watch your fat intake, then that is where, the decision to have low or no fat dairy products might be best for you. But in terms of weight loss as a whole, it's not going to make as big of an impact. And eating more full fat foods are going to promote satiety, keep you fuller longer, reduce your appetite, and cravings as well. So things to keep in mind when you're choosing those low or no fat dairy products. Plus they taste better. I mean, I prefer full fat yogurt over no fat yogurt, and that's just me. I think it tastes better, and that's what we're here for, right? Fourth question is, how do I monitor portions when it's not tracked on the food log? So kind of similar question to our calorie tracking question, as far as like, what are some ways to monitor portions when you're not really like tracking them? And so the easiest thing to do when it comes to controlling your portions is pay attention to suggested serving sizes on labels. Any food that you grab, typically, unless it's like a fresh, veggie or protein, is going to have a nutrition label that's going to have a suggested serving size on it. So things like rice, for example, the suggested serving size is 1/2 cup. So stick with that. Make sure you're not just like spoonful and keeping portions of rice on your plates, or like, not paying attention to that. So always go by the suggested serving size on labels. And then I'm going to sound like a broken record here with plate division, you guys, but I talk about it a lot. Divide your plate up when you eat. So having 1/2 of your plate come from veggies, 1/4 protein, and then 1/4 whole grains. That's going to be a really, really good way to monitor your portions, making sure you're getting more of like the lower calorie, more nutrient dense foods like veggies, and then controlling your portions with like your protein and your carbs. And then the second thing, or the third thing, I guess, is listening to your hunger cues. So again, if you're taking time to slow down, check in with yourself every few bites to see, are you full? Are you still hungry? Take a sip of water in between a few bites too. That's going to control your portions to where you're not overeating, and being able to stay closer to what is recommended. And then also, you know, if you're someone who's out there who like does not know what to eat for each meal, how much of something to eat for each meal, reach out to your coach, because we have some really great resources. We use the myplate.gov website a lot for you guys to really get a good idea of like how many servings per food you're supposed to eat per day and all of that stuff. So please utilize us as a resource. But if you're not physically tracking portions, really just, you know, pay attention to suggested serving size, divide your plate, listen to your hunger cues. And fifth question, I'm ending the day with a little bit of a lighter non-nutrition question that we get a lot is, how do I set realistic goals? So a lot of us have come into a weight loss journey or a fitness journey and have these big broad goals, but we don't know where to start. You know, how do I achieve this? How do I even know my goal is realistic or achievable or sustainable? So the best thing to do is turn your goals into SMART goals. So if you guys aren't sure what a SMART goal is, we have an amazing resource that we can send you. But it's really taking a more broad goal and making it really specific by following these steps, okay? So taking a goal like, I wanna exercise more, and turning that into, what does that look like per week? How many minutes per week? What activity are you gonna do? What time of day are you gonna do it? Like really get specific with that goal so that you are setting yourself up for success to achieve it. The M, how will I measure success, is one of the biggest things too, is set up a measure of progress. How do you know you achieved that goal? Is it getting, you know, your exercise in 3 days a week? Is it getting it in 3 days a month? What does that look like for you? Is it getting in a certain amount of minutes? So make sure you're setting up your measure of progress. And then another thing is use reward systems. Like we are all here for rewarding ourselves and making sure that you're not using a food reward. But an example could be, you know, if you meet your exercise goal for 4 weeks, you know, in a row, go get yourself a new piece of clothing, a pedicure, do something nice for yourself. Make it a challenge for yourself, make it exciting and fun. And then the last thing is use external cues and your support system. So tell your friends and family about a goal that you have, include your coach in your goal so we can hold you, you know, help you hold you accountable. Use your spouse, your kids, whatever that looks like, so that you are doing everything you can to make sure you're achieving that goal. So if you guys want this SMART goal image, reach out to your coach, we'll send it to you. But it's a really good way to set goals for yourself for the week. There was a ton of information that I put out there today, so you're probably just taking some time to digest it, which is fine. So as always, if you guys have any follow-up questions to anything that I talked about today, please let us know. Otherwise, continue to pop in your questions to the event, to the events when they pop up in your app, so I can continue to provide you guys with this information. So thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have an amazing day.